Odysseus's men, half of them anyways, have been turned into pigs by some lady in the woods. Odysseus, brave leader that he is, has decided to go and try to rescue them. Let's find out what happens when he does. Odysseus slung his bronze sword over his shoulder. His men watched with great distress as he left their camp and headed off into the woods. Odysseus walked through the quiet green forest, through shadow and light, past gnarled trees and dense brush, until finally he came to the valley. In the distance rose the gleaming stone walls of the witch's palace. Odysseus halted. For a moment he thought of turning back, but he quickly gathered his strength and moved boldly toward the gate. Suddenly a young man stepped into his path. Odysseus started to reach for his sword, but in an instant he realized this was no ordinary human. The man was radiant. He shone with a light so bright that Odysseus was forced to look away. "Your courage is admirable," Odysseus said to the stranger, "but do you know who your enemy is? Have you never heard of Circe, the enchantress, daughter of the sun and the sea?" Odysseus sighed with despair. He had indeed heard of Circe, the enchantress. He knew that as a mortal he had no power to escape her charms. Once he entered her palace, he would certainly be put under a spell like the rest. "Do not despair, Odysseus," said the stranger. "I have come to help you conquer Circe and your free men. Will you not trust Hermes?" Odysseus looked up. Could this truly be Hermes, the messenger god of Mount Olympus, son of Zeus and protectors of heroes and travelers? So remember, the Greeks believed that gods and goddesses visited people in their everyday lives, especially if you were doing something like showing courage, being a hero. You might get a visit from someone like Hermes to protect you or help you along your way. "I bring a charm to protect you from the witch's spell," said Hermes. "What is it?" breathed Odysseus. "A special herb impossible for humans to unearth," said Hermes. "Only the gods can take it from the ground." The god reached into a bag and pulled out a black-rooted herb with a flower as white as milk. "The gods call the flower moly," he said. "Eat the moly and it will protect you from anything that Circe gives you to eat or drink. When she taps you with her wand, draw your sword and make her swear an oath not to harm you." Hermes handed the black-rooted herb to Odysseus. Then, without a word, the shining god turned and disappeared back into the green forest. Odysseus stared after Hermes in wonder. Until now on his journey, Odysseus had only angered the gods. The warrior goddess Athena, the sea god Poseidon, and the wind god Aeolus. Were the gods looking upon him with favor again? Odysseus looked down at the magic moly in his hands. He raised the flower to his lips and ate it. Then, with new strength and courage, he walked toward the gleaming walls of the witch's palace. Chapter 5. The Witch's Palace. Odysseus opened the gate that led to Circe's palace. Huge wolves and lions prowled the courtyard. The animals approached him eagerly, sniffing the air and making soft, friendly sounds. Odysseus stared at them with horror and pity. He knew that they were men trapped in the bodies of wild creatures. Odysseus moved swiftly through the courtyard. At the door of the palace, he called out for Circe. Soon the enchantress appeared. Her long braids gleamed like gold. Her jeweled gown shimmered and sparkled. She spoke in a soft, warm voice. "Enter, please," she said to Odysseus, and she held open the door. Without a word, Odysseus stepped into the sunlit palace. Circe invited him to sit down and rest. "Let me make a drink to refresh you after your long travels," she said. She left the room for a moment. Then she came back with a cup, and she handed it to Odysseus. "Here," she said, "drink this." Odysseus put the cup to his lips. As he sipped the brew, Circe tapped him with her wand. "Foolish man," she said, "off to the pigsty with the rest of them." Hermes' magic herb protected Odysseus from Circe's evil spell. He did not turn into a pig as the witch had expected. Instead, he pulled out his bronze sword and held it to her throat. Circe shrieked in alarm. "Why does my magic have no effect on you?" she cried. Who are you? What is your name? My name is Odysseus, he told her. Odysseus, she said. Hermes once told me that a great warrior named Odysseus would someday visit my palace. If you are indeed this man, put away your sword. We must trust one another and become friends. Would you trust Circe? I don't know. Odysseus glared at her. How can you speak of trust when your evil magic has transformed my men into beasts? You must swear an oath that you will do nothing to harm me. Circe bowed her head. In a whisper, she swore not to harm Odysseus. When Odysseus put his sword away, she called for her handmaidens. Lovely nymphs of the woods and rivers slipped out from the shadows of the palace. They made a great fire under a huge cauldron of water. Odysseus bathed in the soft, healing waters. Then he dressed in a flowing cloak. The nymphs led him to the great hall of the palace where a feast had been prepared for him. Circe invited Odysseus to sit at her table. She filled their golden cups with wine. But Odysseus would not eat or drink. He sat in silence, staring at Circe. Odysseus, why will you not eat my bread or drink my wine? She asked. You must not fear me now, for I've given my solemn oath that I will never harm you. Odysseus fixed his eyes upon her. What sort of captain could enjoy meat or wine when his men are not free? He asked. If you want me to be happy at your table, you must undo the spell you have cast over my men. Circe held his gaze for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath and rose from the table. With her wand in her hand, she stepped out of the palace into the courtyard. Odysseus followed her and watched her open the gate to the pigsty. 22 fat pink hogs barreled forward, snorting and grunting. The enchantress rubbed a potion on the head of each animal, then touched them all with her wand. All at once their bristles fell off, and the pigs miraculously turned back into men. The men were younger, taller, and more handsome than ever before. They embraced Odysseus and wept with joy. They asked about their comrades. Even Circe was moved by the tears of her captives. Odysseus, go back to the rest of your crew. Bring them to my palace, she said. I swear that I will treat them well too. Odysseus left the palace. He hurried through the green forest until he came to the men waiting for him on the shore. When they saw their leader alive, they shouted with great relief and threw their arms around him. With the help of Hermes, the spell of Circe the enchantress has been broken, said Odysseus. Your comrades have all been turned back into men. Come with me now to the palace, and you shall be united with them. Some of the Greeks drew back in fear. I assure you, Odysseus told them gently, Circe has sworn to welcome you into her palace. All the men finally agreed to go with Odysseus. They pulled their ship onto the shore and hid all their belongings in a cave. Then they followed Odysseus back through the shadowy green forest until they came to Circe's glimmering palace. Circe welcomed the Greeks into her palace. She bid her handmaidens to draw baths for the men and anoint them with olive oil. The nymphs gave the tired Greeks woolen cloaks and tunics, and then led them to a feast in the great hall. At the feast, Circe urged Odysseus to remain with her in the palace. You are not the same man you were when you left Ithaca long ago, she said. Your battles and sorrows have left you weak and weary. Your own family will not know you. Odysseus did indeed feel a great weariness as he thought of the war with Troy and his nightmarish voyage toward home, the monsters and giants, the cruel deaths of his men. Stay with me until you have forgotten all your grief and sad memories, said Circe. When you are strong in mind and body, I will help you find your way home. Feeling the burden of his losses, Odysseus surrendered to the wishes of the lovely witch. He promised Circe he would stay with her until he and his men were strong again. I'm kind of suspicious still. I don't know about Circe. She seems kind of sneaky. Aside from that, while she turned Odysseus's men back into men, what about the rest of the people out there? The lions and wolves. Interesting. All right, boys and girls, I have a special assignment for you today that I hope you'll have some fun with. So go to the next slide and check it out.